Mindfulness sounds so peaceful in theory, listeners. Quiet moments, steady breathing, presence. But for many people, especially those living with ADHD, that peace can feel out of reach. Our world tells us to slow down, but just think about it. Like, what if your brain was never wired to move at that speed? Listeners, today on this conversation on the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana, this is for the people who have tried meditation apps, sat through mindfulness workshops, and still they feel their mind is running marathons while everyone else is on a gentle roll. My guest, Jorie Houlihan, knows this from inside out, listeners. She's a wife, mom of two ADHD teens, a coach speaker, and someone who didn't get her ADHD diagnosis until she was 49, after decades of wondering why nothing ever seemed to stick. From real estate to theater, she has lived through the chaos and finally learned to build systems that work for her brain, not against it. So, I invite all of you to talk about mindfulness. Let's together talk about mindfulness when our mind won't sit still. And let's try to explore the answer to this question. What does presence look like when distraction is your default? So, Jory, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sana. This is a great topic to talk about, especially for ADHD. So, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely, like 100% agree. Joy, to begin with, I want to start with something real here. Like, it's kind of unfortunate even for me because I sometimes feel very guilty that mindfulness, it often gets marketed as this sitting still, meditating, eyes closed, everything is quiet, and then breathing. But for someone with ADHD, that can sound almost impossible. And I'm there.
Hmm.
I can understand that. So, what does mindfulness actually mean to you in practice, not in theory?
So, I actually learned transcendental meditation.
Okay.
I'd lost both my parents. I had not been diagnosed yet,
Okay.
and I desperately needed something because I thought my brain was just going to explode at that point.
Mhm.
And I kept seeing all these things about it, and I thought, you know what? I have nothing to lose. And one of the things that actually made me feel really good going into this, I was explaining to the woman who was teaching this. I
Mhm.
said, I have tried meditation so many times, and I can't make my mind stop thinking. Like it's just always going. And she said, well, she's like, your mind was designed to think, and that's okay. What you want to do is when you notice that it has drifted off, you just acknowledge that it has, and then you just come back. They give you a word, and she's like, and just come back to your word. And there was something about her basically giving me permission to let my mind, like, it's okay if your mind wanders. Like that's kind of
Mhm.
the point of your brain is to think, right?
Yeah.
So I always want to tell people who are looking for ways to be more mindful when they have ADHD that it's okay to let your brain think. But what we want to do is create things that work for you where you feel that you are actually calmer when you come down from it, right? Like if you are trying to meditate and you feel more stressed out because your mind kept wandering and you tried to bring it back, like that's clearly not for you. And that's okay. For
Mhm.
ADHD, a lot of what I talk to clients about, et cetera, is I want you to think about times in the past where
Mhm.
you did feel calm, right? Where you did feel kind of at peace or present. What was going on during that time? What happened right before, if you can remember? Um, and let's find a way to maybe try to incorporate that into a practice for you. But mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting there, cross legged with your hands on your knees saying, "Oh." because that's just not, first of all, so many of us can't even sit still that long.
Exactly.
So mindfulness for that can be doing what I call walking meditation, which is where you go for a walk outside and you're listening for the sounds, right? You're smelling what's in the air. You're listening to like the sounds of like, so it's fall here right now. So like leaves crackling under your feet when you're walking, um, picking up things and feeling them. And I don't necessarily recommend just picking things up on a walk with to eat, but but it's really about like slowing down to really let your senses take over, and it helps to bring you more into the present. And because we are so curious, our brains want to pay attention to everything because our frontal lobe doesn't fire properly.
Yeah.
So the frontal lobe is supposed to be working as a filter to filter out the 99% of information that we're inundated with that we don't need to know on a conscious level. But it doesn't work properly because of the lack of dopamine, which is then converted into norepinephrine, and that's what fires the frontal lobe. So we get way more information that gets through that should have been filtered, that other people can filter out. And so that's one of the reasons that we are so easily distracted. And when we can take these walks, for example, and just go, okay, on this walk, I want to see how many different kinds of birds I can hear,
Mm,
right? It just gives your brain something to focus on right there. And it's
mm,
going, okay, and because some people are like, they know like what the different chirps are, like which
yeah.
bird that goes to kind of thing, to kind of go, oh, I know what that bird is. Oh, I don't know what that bird is. Right. But it's still bringing them back into being in the moment and being present. Or, going out and saying, okay, I'm going to see how many different kinds of wildflowers I can find on my walk today. And so that just automatically forces your brain to be focused on that one thing, right? Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean your mind isn't still going to wander because, I will be talking with somebody and my mind will wander not because they were boring, but because they sighed a certain way that reminded me of something that happened in the third grade. And then my
Mm.
brain's off to the races, right? So, assuming that more than likely your brain will, get distracted at some point, I want you to give yourself permission to just have some grace with yourself. Honestly, sometimes I think the reason that mindfulness is so challenging for us isn't always because of our fast moving brains, but it's also because we're so stressed trying to not have a fast moving brain. And when you can just be like, it is what it is, right? I can't do anything about it. It is what it is. Let's just see what happens. I think you're going to have a much better experience with that.
Yeah.
Um, Mindfulness can also just be taking a bath
Yep.
and letting your mind wander, letting it go all over the place, right? Because that warm water and maybe you've got some nice music going and a candle or something. But for other people, mindfulness is actually being really active. It can be like going for a run. I mean, I used to run and you do get into a bit of a meditative state when you're running
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's like a rhythm to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just really important to think about what works for you and not worry about what everybody else is doing because our brains don't work like everybody else's.
Mhm. I really, really, it kind of created such a beautiful mental picture within me. Like, it kind of brought me to smile because the senses, the sensory, like verbally, how you beautifully painted the chirps, or sometimes, taking bath, or even, when we are cooking, the
Mhm.
the sound of, something, like the glistering sound. I don't know what's the exact word, but it really, really, like, I find it so, like, making me focused on it. I just forget about everything and just focusing on whether it's a parrot chirping, or there's a pigeon, or there's a dog barking. And
Yeah.
it really, or maybe the leaves rustling outside when it's a windy day, sometimes even rain, the thunder. Um,
Yes.
it,
I
r-
love a good storm.
I'm, oh my God. I do. Until unless you're outside and you are,
Yeah,
Oh my
then I could
God.
be without, but when I'm inside, I love looking in
No,
store.
yeah, yeah, I know. And that really calms me down so much. I don't like the quiet, to be honest. And that is why I think that I felt relieved that, um, people are accepting that mindfulness is not what popularly or, culturally projected as this, completely quiet and still and kind of trying to suppress my fast moving brain. But it is accepting everything and it is trying to having that dialogue. I'm trying to have the dialogue with my brain that, okay, you don't need to be still. Maybe you can just kind of keep yourself focused in that chaos as well.
Yeah, the it's kind of a cliche of the deep breathing, right? To like
Mm.
but I mean, there's science behind that though. Deep breathing is one of the best ways to calm your central nervous system.
Yep.
Pe- People with ADHD have emotional dysregulation. We are very easily overstimulated.
Mm.
We're often told we're too much or we're too sensitive or too whatever. And and sometimes we do kind of find ourselves in a situation where, like yesterday, I was so irritable and I'm like, what is going on? And I'm getting really, and I was like, wait, no. And I took in some deep breaths. I'm like, okay, what could what's been going on? Like the taking the deep breaths allowed me to stop and pause
Mm.
and then to ask myself questions because I'm a big proponent of looking at everything through the lens of curiosity and not judgment. And so when I was able to stop, take those deep breaths in, and then ask myself questions, okay, I'm clearly very irritable right now. You know, is there something within my control that that will help me? Because sometimes it's just hormones or stress or whatever. Um, but it allowed me to slow down a little bit and be like, okay, what is going on here? And that is also mindfulness, right?
Yep.
Mindfulness, as I said before, mindfulness isn't always sitting there and oming and, whatever. Sometimes it is just forcing yourself, however, and I don't like using the word force, I shouldn't say that, but
Mhm.
allowing yourself to be present in a moment that is stressful or is overwhelming to just simply say, okay, what's going on here? Right? Be curious about it. And when you can look at things through a lens of curiosity, it changes how you view things where you would normally be, you know, criticizing yourself. It changes it because you're like, okay, I said, and so like yesterday it was like, well, I've got this and this going on. We've had a death in the family. I just have
Mhm.
a lot on my plate right now. So I need to maybe take a little bit of a rest. And I took the afternoon off yesterday because I was
Mm.
really just in this place and I felt really okay with doing that because it was self care. And if I had not taken that time and I had not allowed myself to be present and then ask those questions, I would have tried to push through things and I would have made everything worse. Right. So
Yeah.
finding those moments, and it can be a lot of times people with ADHD, they're like, oh, it's just one more task I have to think about. Right. Oh, I
Exactly.
have to meditate. So I recommend attaching it to something that you already have as part of your routine, right? So, like if you make coffee every morning, while you're waiting for the coffee to brew, maybe take a moment to just take in some deep breaths, say, find one
Mm.
thing to be grateful for, and then you can move on. It was a moment where you could be present. You weren't in a hurry. You weren't trying, like you were just letting your coffee brew. Maybe your meditation was smelling the coffee brew,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Um, But then I love that too. And so but that allows you then to add it to something you already do, right? And it's not feeling quite so much like, "Oh, it's one more task." Now, that being said, you will have to create reminders to do it because when it isn't a part of your routine yet, you'll forget. And so, like, if let's say that's using that example of the coffee maker, maybe you put a sticky note on the on button for your
Mhm.
coffee maker so you can't miss it, right? And then go, okay, starting this. All right, now I'm going to do, while that's brewing, I'm going to take some deep breaths or whatever you choose to do for yourself, whatever works for you, to just give yourself a couple minutes of just being present in that moment. Like I said, an easy way to do that might be to just smell the coffee brewing and how happy that makes you because you know it's going to be good and it's going to wake you up and, and I'm going to have a great day, whatever. So it's called habit stacking when you do that, when you add something to a habit or routine you already have. So I do recommend doing that instead of trying to put together a whole big mindfulness thing on its own. Because for ADHD, you won't follow through on that. It becomes too big and overwhelming. And you want to just start off with like little moments and be okay with that and celebrate when you do it. I mean, you don't have to have a party, but unless you want to, I'm all for it. But but just simply being like, hey, I did it. Okay. All right. That was kind of cool. All right. I'll do this tomorrow. Right.
Yeah.
And then as you continue to do it, you're going to start finding yourself craving it. That's been my experience anyway, where I started to do these meditations and I really every morning started to go, I really like that time for myself. I like sitting there and, I was doing the transcendental meditation, but I also have an app that has like some guided meditations because sometimes I need to change it up a little bit. But I love being outside. I love sitting outside and listening to water running. That can be a way to do it. So
Yep.
there's just so many different ways. And I guess the main point I'm trying to make in a very long way is find the things that make you happy and see how you can incorporate that, right? But
Mm.
do what works for you. Don't think about what everybody else is doing. Like I said before, think about the things that work for you because what works for other people. If it doesn't work for you, then there's no point and you're just wasting time, right?
Yeah.
It's always okay to experiment and try things that I'm okay with, but don't think you have somehow failed if a certain technique or a certain type of mindfulness doesn't work for you. It just doesn't work for you. That's it. There's no shame in that. There's no failing in that. It just doesn't work for your brain, and that's okay. You want to find the things that work for your brain and think of it like a science experiment, right? Like try
Yeah.
different things and see what works, see what doesn't. Because then if it doesn't work, you're like, okay, yeah, that definitely is that one's not for me. And you never know because sometimes things that weren't for me a few years ago, sometimes are for me now. Because as we evolve and change, our needs evolve and change. So just be open.
Agreed. Agreed. No. And coming back to the coffee one, I really love that once again, Jory. The viewing and the roasting and everything, and then putting the milk in there. Yeah, if I'm having a latte or a cappuccino. Wow, okay. Oh, superb. And also when you look at the traditional approaches, Jory, like what kind of gaps you see there? Like what frustrated, like when you first started trying mindfulness, what frustrated you most about the traditional approaches?
That I that I couldn't make my mind stop. And I thought that was
Mm.
a requirement. And I wish that these practices would be more open about it isn't about shutting your brain down
Mhm.
because it's not designed to do that. The freedom I felt once that instructor said, "Well, of course, your brain's designed to work or to think," right?
Yeah.
That made a huge difference in terms of my being able to meditate because I thought, "I can't sit there for 20 minutes. Is she crazy?" But I found myself being able to do it because in part I wasn't constantly worrying about, am I doing it wrong? I was just doing it the way it worked for me. I always joke, I meditate. It may not be the way God intended, but it's the one that works for me. And that's what I can say about that. I think the gap with a lot of things when it comes to ADHD is that they're not designed for neurodivergent brains. They don't take into consideration brains that work like ours, where we also have things like time blindness. So we don't feel time passing. So if something is boring, for example, and a lot of people would consider meditation boring, what to a neurotypical person may be like, oh, that was 15 minutes that went by so fast. But to a neurodivergent person, that could have felt like a freaking eternity.
Yeah.
And But at the same time, if it's something we really enjoy, it will go by really fast. I wish more things took into consideration, not just mindfulness, really a lot of things in life,
Yeah.
brain differences, because it's not that people with ADHD are not broken.
Mm.
We just have a different operating system. I
Exactly.
tell people, I tell people, while the rest of the world was born with a PC brain, we were born with Macs. And the issue is not having the Mac brain. The issue is that we were given the PC manual to work with. And so when I say that to clients, they go, "Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense." And I said, "So you've been trying to do it the way everybody else does it, but their brains don't work like yours. So we need to write out what your owner's manual looks like, right?" Um, and so that's usually where I see most gaps is where they just don't consider other brain types.
Mhm.
And I also feel, and I this sounds really terrible, but sometimes there's a little bit of an elitist feel for people who are in the mindfulness space sometimes. You're definitely not one of them. But like this, like, oh, you can't do this. You're not trying hard enough kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I've seen that in places. And I'm like, yeah, that's not helpful. Like, it's not help anybody.
Yeah.
And, this is supposed to be a place where people can really feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Connection, really.
Mm.
Even if you are meditating by yourself, that collective, right? You are in a
Mhm.
collective of people who meditate or do walking meditation or run or whatever. But there is, I feel anyway, a connection that happens when you do that. And so what I would really like to see is a little bit more focus on that as opposed to whether somebody's doing it correctly,
Mhm.
because it's going to look different for everybody. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree. And also, Jory, some critics argue that mindfulness culture can actually invalidate ADHD experiences. Like telling people to be just present when their brains literally can't. So, what's your take on that? Like, is mindfulness being oversimplified for neurodivergent people?
I don't I don't know, I guess. I would say that for people okay, let me back up. For people with ADHD, a lot of times we do have to oversimplify how we go about doing something, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's not because we can't handle complicated things, but for example, like a neurotypical person, if I say, "Is doing the laundry, would you consider that one task or many tasks?" And they would say, "One, it's laundry."
Yeah. Yeah.
But in my brain, it is, I have to go gather the clothes. I have to sort the clothes. I have to put the clothes in the washing machine. I have to put in the soap. I have to close the door. My brain sees every one of those steps. And so that's why the overwhelm kicks in because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. And because I have time blindness, my brain, if it's a task that's a non preferred task like laundry, I'm going to go, oh, this is going to take me forever. And that just allows me to procrastinate. That's what that does.
Yeah.
But when I can break things down into smaller components, simplifying it, it takes that part out of it, right? It simplifies it in a bit. So it may be, okay, so for the first bit, I'm going to go, first, I'm just going to gather all the clothes and then we'll just go from there. Well, that part's easy enough, right? And it's okay. Let's sort them really quick. Sorting usually doesn't take too long. Okay. All right. Well, this has been easy. Okay. Now I can throw some in, right? Once I
Mhm.
get the momentum going, I'm fine. And so when it comes to people with ADHD and meditation and simplifying things or oversimplifying it, I want people who have ADHD to think about, what does meditation feel like for you? Does it feel like it's a task or is it, okay, well, I have to find a quiet spot. Do I have to find a comfortable chair? Do I want to have headphones in? Or do I want to go for a walk? Like we tend to overthink it
Mhm. Mhm.
and we're really good at overthinking things. Um, Instead of just, I'm going to just sit down and I'm going to take in some deep breaths. If that's oversimplifying it, and if somebody gets offended by that, that's kind of on them. To me, that is, just find the moments that work for you. And because you can always build on that. Like I have a morning routine, but it
Mhm.
didn't start off in the full complexity that it is now. It started off with the meditation. when I learned transcendental meditation. And then I read the book, The Artist's Way, and she talks about the morning pages where you just brain dump basically whatever comes to your brain for
Mhm.
3 pages. So I added that. I was like, I love this. I'm going to do that. So I do that before I do the meditation. And then I had read somewhere that the most successful people in the world read every day. And I'm like, okay. So then I added that. But this was all over a period of a couple of years. Like it started off with one thing and I just slowly, incrementally added things as they came to my attention. If I would have tried to do all of that in one sitting, I would have never stuck with it. It would have been way too overwhelming. And so the other thing I would say to this is, and I don't know if this is really answering your question, but I think it's important to point out
Mhm.
is you don't have to do it every day. Like some people are like, I have to do this every single day. And people with ADHD tend to have all or nothing thinking. So it's like if they miss one day, they're like, oh, see, this doesn't work. And then they'll throw out like an entire system.
Yeah, yeah.
And it can be, you know what, you just didn't do it today. That's okay. You can do it tomorrow. There's no rule saying you can't do it tomorrow. We have to kind of give ourselves permission ahead of time to allow that to happen. Because very often if we miss one day, then we know we're like, oh, well, I'm never going to be doing that again because that's been our history.
Mhm.
But a lot of times we don't go back out of, I don't know if shame's the right word, but feeling like we have somehow failed because we missed a day. We take it very personally when we think we have failed. And, um, but it is, you haven't failed. You just, again, you'll hear me repeat this a lot. You just need to do it for the way that your brain does it. And, but you want to try to keep it simple in the beginning so that it will increase your odds of sticking with it. And then you can always, like I said, add things to it later.
Hmm. And this is something very, very uh, like, generally we would say that mm, to make this as a habit or to practice this, you need to be consistent daily. But I think this is definitely kind of, a really, really, this is something new. I didn't know about this, Jory. This is really, I think, thank you so much because you shared this, because I think this is such a bold and necessary take, not about dismissing mindfulness, but redefining it actually.
Hmm. Yeah, just making it work for you and whatever that looks like for you. And again, don't feel like you have failed because how everybody else does it doesn't work for you. You're unique. I mean, we're all unique,
Yeah.
right? But neurodivergent people just have their twist on uniqueness, right? Which is how our brains work. And when we keep trying to force ourselves into the neurotypical box, it doesn't work. I I joke, I'm like, we are out of the box thinkers about everything except executive functioning. And then we try to shove ourselves in the neurotypical box. And I'm like, you're a shiny disco globe. Like, you're not going to fit in this box. You need to shine. You need to sparkle. You need to do things your way. And as long as my feeling if it isn't hurting anybody, right? You or anybody else, who cares? Like, if it works for you, then do it. And, you just want to find the things that give you joy. And sometimes for me, meditation takes the form of like just listening to songs that give me dopamine.
Mm. Yeah.
I didn't realize this until after I was diagnosed, but like
Okay.
we could listen to the same song over and over and over
I
and over
know.
again.
I know.
And I was like, wait, neurotypical people don't do that. And they don't. I'm like, how can you not? Like, there's so much dopamine in a good song. Like, do you
Exactly.
not listen to it over and over?
Exactly.
But it makes me so happy sometimes, and so that's also to me, that is also kind of a form of mindfulness, is just being able to be in the moment with the music, listening, feeling the feelings that it's giving me, and then going on with my day. So, find the things that work for you.
Wow. I'm loving this, because um and guess I can listen to a song on loop for, like, I don't know. Uh,
Mhm.
there, in fact, there are certain movies which I can watch like maybe more than 100 or 200 times, and it never
Yep.
ever becomes tiring for me. I mean, I have not seen, like, maybe there could be, but my closest friends, they will be like, why have you have watched it like 50 times? How can you watch it like for the 51st time? But that's how I love it. For me, that's the way of focusing and living through that, getting that dopamine rush within me once again that makes me happy. So
Mhm.
I
Yep,
also,
I'm totally with you on that. Yeah. Same thing. It's like every time Office Space comes on, I'm like, I love this movie. And it doesn't matter where it is in the movie, I will just finish watching it every single time. And, I people are the same way. They're like, how many times have you seen this movie? I'm like, I have lost track. I don't know, but I love it.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And especially, I think this is going to be the highlight of this conversation, Jory, specifically about consistently. I think it is less about the rigid consistency. It's more about, the flexible integration. I really, really love that idea, and I'm very sure our listeners are also going to love it.
Yeah. I think that like a, a lot of people, and these are usually the neurotypical people, like they see it as a form of like discipline. But the word discipline for people with ADHD is very triggering because we've been accused of not having any. And it's not that we don't have discipline. We just our brain just works differently, right? And so, but at the same time, flexibility is scary for us because we also tend to have rigid thinking. And so, when we go, no, we have to do it this way. And we tend to get a little out of sorts with that. And so allowing yourself, telling yourself from the beginning, I am just going to play around with this and see what works for me. And if you, especially if this is new, maybe setting some reminders on your phone or something that will come up like on your computer screen, even to just say, okay, let's take some deep breaths, right? Because sometimes we do just get caught up in our day and we forget about it. But this idea that you have to do it every single day, you wanna do it fairly consistently because you want it to become more of an innate part of your day where you don't have to think about it as much. Like, you can start to where you start to find yourself being more present without it being an "I am going to be present right now" kind of thing.
Mm.
But you have again, you have to do it the way that works for you. If you can do it every day, great. There's no judgment with that either. But please, I'm begging you, if you miss a day, don't say, well, this didn't work. Keep going. Just try again the next day. Try again, like in that moment. Go, oh, I could just take some deep breaths right now to see how it feels. Again, look at it with curiosity, like a science experiment. Have fun with it. It doesn't always have to be this like super serious thing. A lot of people find meditation to be something where something always profound has to come from it. No, sometimes it's just letting your brain rest a minute, whatever that looks like for you. And if it doesn't rest, that's okay. Some days you're just going to have days where your brain is just going to be its own beast. And it's not that you're doing something wrong. It just is what it is. You try again tomorrow.
Exactly. Beautiful, beautiful. So, Joey, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you, and also they would like to listen to your podcast, and they would like to get all the resources that you have, what would be the
Mhm.
best way?
So they can go to joriehoulihan.com. And they can see, I offer private coaching, things like that. And there's a link also to the podcast there. The podcast itself is called ADHD and with Jorie Houlihan. And you can get that pretty much anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Beautiful. And for all the listeners, I'm gonna make all the details mentioned in the show notes. So just refer to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And I think,
Oh, can I add one more thing?
yeah, please, please go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've mentioned several different things here today. If
Mm.
you have ADHD, please just pick one and do that for a while. We tend to want to do all the things yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So please just pick one. I know it will be so hard. Trust me, I get this, but I actively work to just pick one new thing to try at a time and I give it some time. So I just wanted to put that out there because I have made that mistake and I want to just tell people it's okay to just do one thing. And in fact, it's recommended.
I love that idea because, Jory, for me also, I am a huge believer that when you have so much to look out for, multiple things, I think it's easier for me when I focus on just one thing at a time.
Mhm.
I cannot give out my best when I'm focusing on multiple things. And especially for a woman, I think we are this kind of image of a multitasker there. So I think
Mhm.
I really love that you mentioned that because it can be very hard.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, listeners, there you go. And I think for those living with ADHD, Jury brilliantly tells us that it's not about becoming calm like everyone else, but it's about finding your own version of calm inside the chaos. Jury, thank you so, so much. This was such a heartfelt. I could relate to everything that you said. So, thank you so much for making it so easy and simple, yet so profound.
Oh, well, thank you. Again, thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about this. I want people with ADHD to feel empowered by their ADHD, and that just means learning to work with it. And so if I can help in that respect, that's what I love doing. So thank you for letting me talk about it.
Absolutely. And to all the listeners, if your thoughts feel like a storm today, that doesn't mean that you are failing. Not at all. It means you are human. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep finding those mindful moments that fit you. This is your host, Sana, signing off.